responsibility of telling you that it's time to get serious about commitment. It's time to take the blinders off. Invest your life in the greatest cause on planet Earth. And get committed to a church somewhere. And if you're not from this church, that's fine. But get committed to a church somewhere. I hope it is here. See, if it is, I'm going to give you 3 things that we're going to agree upon as this family of God, meeting at the Galaxy Cinemas in Cambridge. And if you agree, you're going to have an opportunity to say yes. And I guess the way that you'll say yes, I'm trying to think of what a good way is. For the closing song, I hope I'm not getting in the way of our worship team. If I am, you guys trump me, okay? But my idea would be that only stand for the last song if you're saying yes. All right? And if you're not saying yes, then you remain seated. And there'll be no judgment on our part. But sometimes you've got to take a stand, literally and physically. Number 1, what are we going to agree on? As a church, we are going to agree that we will do anything short of sin to reach people for Jesus. You know, some churches err on the side of being cautious, right? You come up to them with a new idea like a drum, which isn't a new idea, or a projector, or a meeting in a movie theater, and they say, I don't know, we don't want to lose any members. So you can have drums if you keep the volume so low that nobody will hear it, or put them behind a wall or something. But we're just not ready for that now. We want to see how that plays out in our friend churches, and if it plays out well, then maybe we'll get on board. But if it doesn't, we're just going to stay comfortable where we're at. So come talk to us in 5 years. There are cautious churches when it comes to the Missio Dei, the mission of God. But this church is going to err on the side of risk. These will be calculated risks, but they will be risks nonetheless. We will take risks to reach people who don't yet know what following Jesus Christ is like. Why? Because we believe in the mission of the church. We believe in the mission of this church. Anyone who knows me, can tell you that my life verse is 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 22b and 23 and following. For the purposes this morning, I'm going to pick it up at verse 19. This is my life verse. And I just love what the Apostle Paul says here. He starts in verse 19 by saying this. Though I am free, and I belong to no man, no one, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. I become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. That's my life verse. And clearly, it was one of Paul's predominating values as well. And when I say it's my life verse, what I mean by that is that someday when I'm in a casket or however I get dead, and people are at my funeral and they hear that verse read, they're going to say, that's true of Paul, it was also true of Daryl. It was also true of Daryl. I become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might win some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share its blessings. Many of you know people whom you love who don't know Christ. I'm not talking about believing in Jesus, right? This week I had coffee with this incredible woman, and she made this distinction. She said, I'm not trying to make people believe in Jesus, I'm trying to make people follow Jesus. I think that's so important, because most of my friends who don't go to church, they believe in Jesus, that he existed in history and so forth. So I'm going to change how I talk about this in my life and when I talk to people. Many of you know people who love, whom you love, who do not follow Jesus. This week I got a phone call from someone who attends this church from time to time. He said, Daryl, you're not going to see me on Sunday because I'm going to be going to a service outside of town. It's for my relative, and she's getting baptized. And she's the only one in her entire family who's a committed Christian. And her family is not in support of this. And so I want to be there to celebrate with her, and I want to be there as a witness to the rest of her family and my extended relatives. And I'm like, you bet, man. You need to be there. Also this week I was meeting with a parent from our church, and this person is newer to the faith, and this person was all choked up because their children are not at the same place with Jesus. They're not following Jesus the way that this parent has discovered joy following Jesus. And some of you shed tears for your kids. And I'm here to say that that is entirely appropriate. It's appropriate to do. And we want to partner with you as a church. We want to partner with you so that, and I hope that you do and you can, so that when they come here, it's going to be a good week. It's going to be a good week. I'll never forget when I finally took my blindfold off, and this happened far later in my life than it should have. And I actually cared about my friends who didn't follow Jesus enough to take risks to invite them to church. And so I'd invite my friends to church, and they'd say no. And it would be a good Sunday. I'd be like, oh man, I should have been here. And so next opportunity I get, because you got to wait sometimes, right? You're not just going to be like in your friend's face all the time, because they're your friends. And they're your friends not just because you want to bring them to church. They're your friends because you love them and care about them. Next time I got an opportunity, I'd invite them to church, and they'd be like, no. And I'd be like, oh man, it was a good Sunday, you know? And then I'd invite them again when that opportunity came, and they'd say yes. I'm like, yeah, right on. And they'd come to church, and it would tank. And I was the preacher. It was like a dead duck off the end of the pulpit. That's when I was in the traditional church. And I'd be like, oh man, this is all focused on inward stuff and membership things that an outside person would just have no interest in. And our commitment to you at River City is that you can invite your people that you love to a church service here any week, and they will get something out of it. I don't think it'll tank. And the reason isn't because we're so great. The reason is because every element of this service, from the start to the finish, is designed with newcomers in mind. If we're going to accommodate or take a risk for anyone, it ain't going to be the members. We don't have members. It's going to be for the newcomers. They're the ones who've taken the biggest risk of all. I mean, if I go to a church as a guest, I'm usually nervous, and I'm a preacher. I mean, can you imagine what it's like if you haven't been in church for 20 years? Many of you can, because many of you at River City were not in the habit of going to church for a long time. It's a risk, man. So, we agree to do anything short of sin to lead people to Jesus. Number 2, we agree to accomplish more with less. We're very passionate to do as much ministry with as little resources as we can. In Matthew chapter 25, verse 23, Jesus is telling a parable, and in this parable, the master replies to the faithful steward by saying, well done, good and faithful steward. You've been faithful with a very few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. And I think the principle that Jesus is communicating gives evidence of the fact that he obviously cared about being faithful with little as well, about stewarding the resources that God gives. And again, I want to take the blindfolds off. I want to invite you into the staff room, into the boardroom of River City Church, so you get an idea of the kind of thinking that goes on around there. If you go to a typical church, one of the first priorities is to get a building. And if we were to have a building that would meet our needs as a church, you look around you for the size that we are, and that would also give us a little bit of capacity for growth, we would carry a mortgage of at least $120,000 a year. Okay? $120,000. I don't know how many of you are good with numbers, but keep that filed away. Second, if we leased a facility with this much space 7 days a week, which would be great, right? Wouldn't you just love to have like all this space for like youth to run around and everything? But if we did that, it would cost us at least $80,000 a year. We've looked at these things. $120,000 minimum for a mortgage, $80,000 minimum for the kind of space that we use here on a Sunday morning and with our ministry center. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a building, and like I said, I'd like access to one 7 days a week, but by holding most of our midweek gatherings in homes, and by renting this place for 4 hours on a Sunday morning in a ministry center that's 950 square feet through the week, it costs us about $40,000 a year. All right? So we're paying a third or less what it would cost to have a mortgage for a church. We're paying half or less what it would cost to lease all the space that we would like. And because of this, we're able to direct a lot more money to ministry. You get more bang for your buck. I get more